Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Boozer. I'm with CUGC HQ, and I am so happy to welcome you all today to our very first webinar of 2019. I hope that you've all had a good start to the year, and like I said, I'm just excited to kick off the year with this one, especially with our presenter today, Mr. Mike Nelson. Mike's done a lot for our community, and he's a member of our content working group, which is the committee that helps us pick webinars and talk about the blogs and everything that we have available online at mycugc.org. So I'm really glad to have him presenting for us today on the big, bad, beautiful world of Azure. But before I hand things over to Mike, I want to introduce our moderator. James Rankin is also a CTP like Mike, and he has been heavily involved with the UK CUGC group. And James is going to keep an eye on the questions for us in the question panel, so definitely type those in for us as we go along. He'll ask some during the presentation and some after, just kind of depends on where we are and what you guys are asking. James, you want to say hello really quickly?
Yes, I certainly would. Hello, everyone. I hope it's not too cold wherever you may be in the world, because I am absolutely freezing at the moment every time I step outside my office. Yeah, we've got Mike today talking about the big, bad, wonderful world of Azure. There it is, a very interesting subject. And obviously, you know, unless you've been living under a rock, then you will have dealt with some Azure at some point. So very much looking forward to it. So as Stephanie said, any questions, just type them in, and usually sometimes I can answer some of them myself, but this being an Azure presentation rather than a CItrix one, it might not be the case, but yeah, just bang them in and we'll see if we can get them answered. So Mike, over to you.
Thank you very much. You are too kind, sir. Thank you, Stephanie, for the introduction, and James for moderating for me. I really appreciate this. I've got to switch over here and show my screen here. Let me make sure I don't mess this up. Okay, hopefully we're good to go there. The same kind of title slide you saw there. Again, my name is Mike Nelson. I am a Citrix CTP. You can reach me at Nell Media on Twitter. Geektweakers.com is my blog, but I don't blog that much. I also have a GitHub. I am a Microsoft MVP and an Azure advisor, a vExpert in VMware, and a vMug leader. And you can see that picture there. That's one of the CTP gatherings meetings we had, where I'm in the back row there, but you might recognize some of those faces when we got together for our picture in Santa Clara. So what we're going to talk about. Let's talk about data centers. Okay, we'll give you some insight on those. We'll do some networking, some servers, compute, storage, and just a slide on SQL. My plan is for this session is to really show you some of the things that have been talked about out in the public. I'm not going to show you anything that's NDA or anything like that, but it is you know, been talked about by Mark Razinovich, who is the vice president at Microsoft, and he's in charge of Azure. You know, it's a presentation around some of the cool things that they're doing, some of the things you might not know about, yeah, the inner workings of Azure, and just some really neat things. And hopefully we'll get to some demos where I can show you some of the things that you might not know about, including, you know, things to look for when you get into the Azure portal. You can play around with things like cognitive services and AI and serial consoles and all that kind of fun stuff. So, but before we get there, what I'd like to do is I'd like to take a little bit of poll of the audience, if I could. And I'm going to ask you a question here. If and somebody can tell me if that shows up for them.
Yep, we see it.
Okay, yep. Good. All right, so do you use Azure for services other than just Citrix? Okay, so you got a couple options there. Obviously, the last option isn't, you know, I hope that you know what Azure is. If you don't, welcome to the world of Azure. But if you could just take a moment and check one of those off for me, I'd appreciate it. And we'll just take a glance here real quick at the results as they're collecting results. Okay. So I'm not exactly sure how, Stephanie, I present the results.
So I can run it, you close it, and then we can share it. There you go.
Oh, okay. All right. That's great. Okay. So as you can see, yes, the green bar, we have quite a bit. And yeah, I noticed a couple folks did do what's in Azure. Yeah, I get that. Hopefully, you know what Azure is. It's Microsoft's cloud. So, but it's really great that you are actually, using Azure for maybe a few other things other than Citrix. And if you aren't, I encourage you to, because it's, like it says, it's a big, bad, beautiful world out there. There's a lot that you can do, and you can go around and do all kinds of things with. So, all right, I'm going to move past the poll here. Oh, thank you. So let me see at my slide. Okay, so first off, got to put a Dilbert cartoon up there, right? So, he migrated the data center to the cloud stopped working, but he couldn't find the phone number for the cloud guy. And of course, you lost our data center. Well, that's one way to look at it. A lot of folks have paranoia about the cloud, right? So I always talk about this when I talk about Azure or AWS or Google Cloud Platform, is, you don't have to be afraid of it. Your data is going to live in the cloud. Your data probably lives mainly in the cloud today, whether you like it or not. It's in your private cloud, a hybrid cloud, or the public cloud. So it's really kind of, take a step back and just say, we can play around in this, and maybe not put production out there if you're, have regulations, compliance, audit, stuff like that can stop you. But you can go out there and just kind of, use the free tier of Azure and get in and play around a little bit. If you, obviously it's a sandbox, so if it breaks, it's a sandbox. It's a demo environment. So go out and have some fun with it. We'll take a little bit of the history first. I want to go through this, and I'll go through these real quick. But in 2002, when Azure was, came into the minds of a few folks at Microsoft, and it was oversubscribed. It was really for east-west traffic. It wasn't architecture for east-west. It was north-south, and it really was a playground for developers. It was a group of engineers and developers that wanted a place to, try out new stuff and try out this shared environment that they were going to create. They had, a couple of them in the beginning actually had no intention of this going public, but it has. And so this is also where their virtualization kernel was developed. This is the birthplace of the Hyper-V kernel. Moving on into like 2005, this is where you get the creation of the official team, which was called Stealth Team 7. And they took what was already created and kind of redesigned it, because they knew this was going to go public. They knew that this was a launching point of the cloud, of the public cloud offering. So they did a complete overhaul. Hardware was ripped, replaced, everything. And they did an implementation of something called RDOS. And if you're not familiar with that, that's actually the project code word was Red Dog. So it's Red Dog OS. They created an operating system just for this cloud environment. And what's kind of cool is that, and it's kind of cool and it's kind of bad, because if you think about it, you can go in and you can still see remnants of Red Dog there. So if you go out and create a virtual machine in Azure, you can see reddog.microsoft.com in the DNS, and that's because it actually is kind of a placeholder DNS that's out there that the developers, created way back when, and they've never really taken it out. So it's kind of good, it's kind of bad, but it's kind of cool to see the history there. And they did software defined before it was a thing. Everything that they worked on when they did the redesign was software defined. Coming into 2008, the Red Dog, aka Azure, was released privately. In 2010, it was released publicly. New data centers are being built, and it's kind of 2000 was the Ballmer effect, and I don't know if you understand what the Ballmer effect was, but it was a time period where Steve Ballmer, the CEO then of Microsoft, wasn't very friendly with other companies and other operating system companies and cloud providers and anybody else in the ecosystem, really. But 2014 brought the Satya revolution, where, hey, we work better together. Why can't we all get along? And they've really embraced the open source movement and things like that as well. 2014 and on were global regions, government, Germany, China, data center evolutions. They're V6. They're actually gone beyond that now. They have about 150 plus services. I'm not exactly sure of that number because they don't release exact numbers. And now artificial intelligence, AI, has taken center stage. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are now the centerpieces of the cloud platform and everything that is around Azure and focuses on Azure is around AI and machine learning. So first off, just so you understand, there's geos and regions, right? So geo is defined by a geographical area. Now it used to be, it was a rough geographical area, but now it's turned more into countries. And it's also, a region is defined by a latency envelope, a bandwidth and latency envelope. 2 milliseconds is maximum on the round trip. That defines a region when you work up in Azure. Now, the only reason I'm telling you this is so you get an idea of how some of these things that we're going to be talking about a little bit later, how they can actually happen with this, the way that the data centers are laid out. But you'll notice that some of them are like hundreds of miles apart. Think about it, you can get 2 milliseconds, 100 miles apart. You got to have a pretty big pipe between those. So. And then they go into availability zones. This gives you the intra-region resiliency. When you have a subscription, it can go in between these zones. They'd have different power lines, generators, water, network, everything. It's pretty much, all separated, physically separated. Now, does this mean that actually, when you have a failure in a region or an availability zone that you don't get impacted? No, and that was evidenced a couple of times in 2018. You could be impacted, not necessarily an outage, right? It's not an actual down state, but things slow to a crawl and so on and so forth. So that happens with any cloud service if you look at the Google, AWS, or Azure. So let's take a look at some of the data centers. This is the one in Cheyenne, Wyoming, right here. And you'll notice that that's what it looks like today, but they've actually taken over another part of that land. They own all that, a lot of that land that goes beyond in this picture, and they've actually taken that over and they're expanding that data center past there. So this is the one in Cheyenne. This is the inside of it. Okay, so this is what the racks look inside of Cheyenne, and you'll notice that everything, if you look down these racks, you can't see, obviously, they don't want you to see what's, the front faces of them, but everything is identical. There's nothing that, this is everything, you could take everything that's in here and it all has an identical part number, if you will. These are all white boxes. These are all things that were created for Microsoft by a manufacturer. These are not like, OEM boxes. And if the thing that's kind of cool when you look at this, if you're a data center architect, if you ever looked at this, first of all, there's no false floor, right? So everything is vented above, but everything is minimal. You look at that; they have their power, their PDUs and everything that are on top, and everything it rises above the floor, the aspect of the hardware is that you can take a piece of hardware. So say that one of those drives fails, that's one of those hard drive fails, they basically take the hard drive out and they throw it away. And then they put a new one in. And the reason is because hardware is cheap, especially when you buy in the volume that Microsoft does. So there's really no repair, if you will. And everything's identical, like I said, so you can just, go into a mass supply and pop it in. All right, this is in Dublin, Ireland. This is actually an example of a newer type of data center. They actually have 3 data centers here, the one that on the left, the one on the right, and then the one in the back is another data center. But these are containerized data centers. So each one of those containers is actually a separate rack system in its own self-contained container. So you'll see how they expand and they just add on data centers. They don't expand a data center, they add another data center. So that's really kind of cool. And it looks like they have a basketball court or something on top of that one. That's kind of cool too. So, and another kind of data center, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Project Netic. Project Netic is actually an underwater data center. So this is actually a cylinder that goes underwater. It contains 12 racks. And you can see all the fans and everything that are in there, and everything's contained. You can't really fit a human in between those racks or anything, but it's made to live underwater for so far up to 3 years. And itself, it uses wave power and solar power a little bit of electricity power coming from the top, but everything else is, it's an airtight, it's put on the ocean floor, and they usually put these in groups of 3 on the floor. But it really, cooling wise and everything else, it saves all those natural resources. And this is actually launched off the coast of Scotland. This is the actual launching. It's about 12 meters in length, about 2.8 meters in diameter, and it's about the size of a 40-foot shipping container that you might see on a ship, or a truck. And this is the slide that Mark shows where they actually putting it, and you can see that yellow tube. That's the actual tether tube that connects to it, and then they drop it down into the ocean. And it's on top of a triangular platform, and it sits on the bottom of the ocean. And when it goes down there, that's what it looks like. It rests on top of that platform, and it's connected with that tube up top. And when you actually have it in the water, this is what, these are cameras that they have mounted. So you can go out there and take a look at this, but these are cameras that they have mounted. And you notice they're using AI to identify the fish and any other sea creatures that may show up. You can go out to the website and you can see this. It's sometimes covered with algae and seaweed, but this is kind of cool. So what about the actual, services that are in Azure? This is a infographic that shows all the different things that you can do in Azure, services-wise, infrastructure services, security and management, hybrid cloud, so on and so forth. There's just so many you can talk about. And in the actual interactive infographic, if you click on one of these, it goes into, drills down into much more detail. So there's a lot you can do. First thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to talk a little bit about Azure Networking. So from a networking standpoint, this is how Azure, an overview of how it's architected. And if you take a look at this, it's really nothing too impressive, right? It's pretty much, a standard network. But what's the inner workings of how this all goes together is really what the keys are, because you're thinking about this has to scale massively. It's not like you're doing your own data center where you only have to scale to a certain, point, a certain percentage. This has to scale, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 times what it can do today. So they have a bunch of pieces of hardware and software that allow that to happen. They also have the one of the largest, I think it is the largest DC dark fiber backbone in the world that goes through the oceans. They just did a Project Maria, which goes into Scotland, outside of, not Scotland, Spain. And it was with Facebook and one other company, I can't remember. But, they have a huge amount of dark fiber that interconnects everything. And then they also have something kind of cool, because you take a look at this and you wonder, how do they actually test the network? How do they, when they do something, when they make a change, how does Microsoft actually check it? Well, they have a network emulator. They do, and this is what their folks use to test this stuff. So they actually have an emulator that emulates their Azure networking. And before they make a change, they can actually go through and test it out, and try it out. So it's really kind of cool. And you're talking about how much they did. I mean, look at this, 12 million core hours spent on emulation in the last 6 months. Bugs caught before hitting production network. So there's a lot of testing that goes on. But if you think about it, you have a production network, and if you have the resources in money and people to have a mirrored kind of like test network, think about the scale of having a test network for a public cloud. That's massive. And they kind of circumvent some of the costs and resources by creating an emulator. It's kind of neat. So from an architecture standpoint, this is a slide that just shows you, overall what is the overall architecture of Azure. And what I wanted to get into was more around the software-defined architecture, because this is software-defined. Microsoft was software-defined before, software-defined was a thing, like I mentioned before. Everything is software, okay? So you have pieces of hardware, but the hardware really isn't that intelligent. Software is driving everything, and that's how you get your software-defined data centers and your software-defined networking, software-defined storage, blah, blah, blah. So it's really kind of cool that they've architected this from the ground up as SDN, because the amount of flexibility they have to create some really cool services and allow for different things to happen is really, makes it quite flexible. As you grow, you have what's called a one fleet host. A one fleet host actually connects at a node agent up to the compute controller, okay? And overall, then it goes back to the directory services and stuff like that. So the one fleet host is really where your stuff is running. So if you ever want to know, hey, where's my data in Azure? Well, it's sitting on one of these one fleet hosts. Out of the probably millions that there are, but somewhere out there, that's where it is. So some of the new features, Azure Firewall. I don't know if you've heard about that. They announced it at Ignite last year, but you can actually put a firewall up in Azure. Before you had to have you had to do some convoluted stuff with network security gateways and stuff like that. But now you can actually put a full-blown firewall into your virtual networks and do logging and everything else. So it's really, really kind of cool for folks that want to get that complete hybrid experience and separate their on-premises network from the public cloud in terms of what traffic can go where. Security folks love this stuff. That leads me into something called Project Swift. So Project Swift is actually really kind of cool because it allows you to fast provision network resources, which a lot of the network folks are really into. It allows you to orchestrate actually everything into a customer's VNet, and by customer's VNet that could be your VNet, or if you're a CSP it could be your customer's VNet, and it allows you to do all this with the orchestrators, the Antares, the service fabric mesh, those type of things with containers like Docker, things like that. So this is really kind of cool and more meant for the network folks, but this again kind of highlights the overall flexibility of how you can automate everything inside of Azure and sprawl out this networking very easily. And we'll get into compute. How about that? Everybody's favorite if you're a hardware person. So this is what you've got. You started out with Gen 2, you go to Gen 3, Gen 4, then they had something called Godzilla. And if you look at that, that's about a 512 gigs of RAM and about a 40 gigabit throughput. Then you started getting in Gen 5, that actually brought it down a little bit because Godzilla was a little bit too expensive. And then they went to Gen 6. Now, Gen 6 is really what a lot of everything is running on top of Azure. There, 768 gigs of RAM. You got multiple SSDs, FPGA, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of that is running. There is Gen 2 will run your A series, VMs and things like that, but they're kind of all split up. And then you have something that was created called the Beast. The Beast is actually a high performance compute platform that can condense a lot of those different VM sizes into it. You're talking about 4 terabytes of RAM, and still have the gigabit throughput, the 40 gigabit throughput, and 4 by 18 cores. That's a lot. And the Beast, right? So what's next? Now you've got the Beast V2, okay, or it's 3 times the size of the Beast with 12 terabyte of RAM. That's huge. It's huge, and you think about it, they just keep packing more and more and more compute power and resources into this hardware. Pretty much, just being able to, they got to find ways to cool and stuff. Why not throw it underground, right? Or throw it in the ocean. So they also have something, called Azure Sphere. Believe it or not, this is something that was announced, and it's kind of like a Raspberry Pi equivalent for IoT. So you'll notice that it's kind of shaped like a little car, but it is a little tiny piece of hardware that if you sign up for it, you can use it for your IoT. And it's kind of like I said, a little Raspberry Pi or Arduino or whatever you want to call it. But that's kind of neat too. And that's the size comparison. Look at that. That's how small it is. 4 megabytes of RAM compared to the big beast. So special purpose. I'm going to skate right through this. This is everything that requires something like enhanced graphic processors or different types of high computing and things like that. Different types of hardware embedded in order for applications and different things to run. So you can get all of this within Azure. We use something called LV2 with the NVMe Direct. This allows for direct access I/O. This is actually in the core, so this is not something that you use on your individual VMs, but this is something that drives the core. They do use NVMe in their high-speed premium SSDs, so there's a lot of speed there, and I'll get to that in a second when we talk about the storage. The serial console is something we'll take a look at. This is where you can actually get in and take a look at what's going on with a VM that you're working with. And this is really kind of cool. I'm amazed at how many people don't know about this. They break a VM and they don't realize that, oh my gosh, I got to go rebuild it. And they just go out and rebuild it without realizing, hey, you can fix this thing because you have a backdoor. So I want to show you that in a little bit. Cloud data protection, this is where you start getting into, things like the trusted compute, the storage encryption, data at rest, and things like that. I'm not going to go through some of this because, again, limited time and I want to get to the demonstrations, but these are things that you really should know about, especially if you're dealing with SQL. If you're working with CItrix, you got to know that you're running SQL on there, and you can do, trusted, transparent database encryption and things like that with SQL. And now you can do the anti-threat protection or the threat protection for SQL. Confidential computing, this allows, computers to, can maintain the data for the customer where Azure folks don't even have access to it. So if you have highly classified data that is beyond a FIPS level or anything like that, they do have confidential computing that you can use as well. Storage, let's jump right into that. This is basically just a layout. This is how the storage actually looks today, right? So you have, and you notice they do use DFS, right? Everything in storage though is called a stamp, a storage stamp. It's basically a stamp. They take the same storage and they stamp it multiple times, but it's basically throw a stamp in and you have this, hierarchy of storage. So it contains all those components, DFS included, but you can see your different types on there, blob, queue, file, and SMB. When you start getting into the blob, you get into high throughput blob. You can get up to 60 megabytes throughput on that, and instantaneous write throughput. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because storage always seems to be between that and networking. That's the slowest part of using the public cloud. So having an understanding of what they're trying to do in storage is really kind of neat. Premium blob storage, the same way. They're trying to get, so you can get premium, so you can get a hot of 10 to 20 milliseconds compared to a premium of 4 to 8 milliseconds on latency. That's really a big deal when you're dealing with highly transactional databases and things like that. And this is the future, right? So they have all these, but there are two more that are coming. One is called the active archive tier, and one's called a deep archive tier, which is like glass and DNA. So just so you're aware, these are some of the things that are happening from the storage perspective, and you don't always have to use the latest and greatest SSD drives and things like that when you're just playing around in Azure and doing sandbox and demos and things like that. Standard SSD, these are the stats for them. When you start getting up into it, you obviously, notice that you can get higher IOPS on the premium SSD, but then, you're paying a little bit more for it. I would go through all this, but again, I'm going to fly through these. You will have this deck to reference, by the way, so, you'll be able to take a look at it after the webinar. The Project Direct Drive is the Ultra SSD. That's the one they just announced last year at Ignite. 160,000 IOPS per disk. Wow, that is like incredible on a single disk. So they've been working on this for like 5 years, and they actually got it less than 1 millisecond latency, but 160,000 IOPS. That is huge. If anybody, storage folks out there. And you're probably going to pay for that performance as well. Hey, but did you know that they have tape up in Azure? They do. They do. They have tape libraries up in Azure. So you can actually use tape libraries. You have to actually work it out with them, but they do have the IBM TS 3500 tape libraries in there. So I know some folks that have actually, have utilized this. But it's really kind of interesting that tape is still there. It's still part of storage. And then they have something called Pelican, Project Pelican. It's no longer a project, really. They just call it Pelican, but it's actually the way to take, disks, hard drives, HDDs, not SSDs, but HDDs, and put them in a tower. Okay, so it's like the middle between tape and And SSD, it's that middle, that tier that goes right in between. So instead of going to tape, you can go to this. It would be like long-term disk storage. This is what it looks like, and what the old storage looked like on the left side, and then the right side is what Pelican looks like. That's how much it's condensed down. Something Project Silica. It's new media. Okay, what it is it's basically a piece of glass, and it's a cloud storage system using quartz glass, and it's written using a what they call a femtosecond laser. So what happens is that if you take a look at this, the piece of glass, this is a 1-inch square piece of glass. And if you take a look at this, each one of those dots, I'm not sure how well they're coming through, but each one of those dots is shot by a laser that contains, and it writes into that glass. One piece of glass square can hold up to 50 terabytes of data. So on 1 inch, 50 terabytes of data. And it's all shot by by a laser, and then you have a read head on the right-hand side there. That is the most expensive part. The glass is actually really cheap, but the reader is really expensive. But think about the storage capability. Now, this is never, not going to take the place of anything that's high-speed storage. This is meant for archiving. This is meant for long-term archiving. So, but it's really kind of cool how densely you can get that data in there. Right? Well, if you think that's cool, take a look at the DNA on Project Palix. So in Palix, it actually does the same thing. It's 1,000 times denser than tape, right? But it works with DNA. It actually does a synthesis, a DNA synthesis, believe it or not. And it writes it to this little piece of pinhead of DNA. And it can get up to 1 exabyte of data on a single molecule of DNA. That is incredible. University of Washington is actually working with Microsoft on this. You can look at this up online. You can go to their website and read all about what they're doing. It's really kind of incredible. It really is. And this is going to be huge, because if you take a look at this from a data center perspective, you can put 1 zettabyte in a data center rack using this technology. So there's no longer going to be this huge hardware sprawl just for storage. This very well could curb that in the future. And then we talk about different scopes from a database perspective. This is the last part of the slides, so I won't PowerPoint you to death here. But pretty much you go through the data centers as stamps, like I told you, that's storage stamps, and then you get down to the actual database engine. Now, this is kind of helpful to know for folks that are dealing with SQL, i.e. some Citrix folks, because Citrix uses SQL. But there are different things you can do with SQL. You can containerize SQL now. You can do all this other kind of cool stuff. You can run SQL on Linux, and you can do that all in Azure. And I highly encourage you to check all that out. And I highly encourage the software vendors to, support those types of things, because it's much more efficient and it costs you a lot less money and resources, a lot less in resources and in money. So from a SQL, you have something called FlexScale, which just came out, and FlexScale actually allows you to expand a database very easily and do long-term storage on it. So you can flex it and throw it into Azure storage, parts of it that are not used, and you can scale up, scale down, and you can do restores right out of the actual store. So it's things that you need to look at. If it, and you can actually deploy one of these and you can just play around with it. It's not available on the free tier. It's still in preview, so it's something that you want to get more involved in it, or if you have a subscription that you can play around with from a EA standpoint or something, then it works out for you pretty good. So from this point, I'm going to go right into taking a look at some of this stuff, some of this cool stuff here, and I am going to switch. Hey, there we go. So,
Michael, just before yes. I've just got a couple of questions have popped out while we were going. So, with this being obviously a CUGC thing, I knew somebody was going to ask this, but what's the benefits and big differences for using Citrix on Azure versus Citrix Cloud in Amazon AWS? Which one is better? Not a loaded question at all.
Yeah, and actually, I honestly, everybody has, their differences when they talk about, they have their biases, right? So I'm actually not really biased. I love Azure. I would say that I like AWS and I like Google Cloud, but that's just because I don't know them that well. I'm getting to know them better. What I'm doing now. But from your question about running Citrix, I mean, Citrix and Microsoft are like, they're coupled together. They're actually working so tightly together, and even with the remote desktops and things like that Microsoft, the virtual managed desktops they're coming out with, Citrix is really trying to bond, and Microsoft is right along with them. So I think that there's a tighter integration there. And I think that on the AWS side, it's not so tight. And I think some of that might have to do, obviously, with their competitor, with VMware being in there with Horizon. But in the future, I don't see how they can continue to not use any public cloud. I really feel that the public cloud is going to be like hardware as it is today. Hardware has really become a commodity, right? It really, if you take a look at it, does it make a lot of difference if you run? I'm going to just name a few off here, no preference. Supermicro, Dell, an HP, or a Lenovo, something, a server. No, because hardware has gotten to a point where it really doesn't matter if you take a look at the whole picture. I really think that the public cloud, I don't think that enterprises are really going to care much about what public cloud they're using as long as it gives them what they, the performance that they need, the connectivity they need, and the recovery that they need. So to tell you the truth, I don't think I can pick one over the other. Now, if you talk to someone who's a Citrix on the Citrix side, they're going to say, yeah, of course, hey, Citrix Cloud with Microsoft. Someone who's on the AWS side, oh no, you can use Citrix over here. It's really, what do you use? And I can't put a stamp on it. I can't say that you should use this over that, really.
I've actually myself got a Citrix AWS implementation going, so maybe I should have thrown something in, but I find that the Citrix control plane sits in Azure, which is a very big thing, and also some of the functionality of some of the services takes its time coming to AWS. For instance, the app layering appliance at the moment, the ALM, won't run in AWS. You'd have to stand up native infrastructure to do that. So there are those little things. Got another quick one here that says, is it possible to use Azure SQL to host Citrix SQL databases? I'm not sure.
I don't believe it's. I mean, if you're talking about from a SQL managed perspective, no, I don't believe that's possible yet. I hope I know that it's been asked, and I know that it's been asked of the product team, and I hope that it's it's coming, because when you get to a managed structure, where the cloud provider just takes care of it for you, and you don't have to pay for that individual VM consumption. If you put a SQL database on a VM in Azure, you have to pay for that consumption. You have to pay for that storage. If you make it more of a managed type scenario, it's a lot less expensive for you, and it's a lot more efficient, right? But to truthfully answer your question, I do not know if it's fully supported or if they will come out of Citrix and say no, or they'll say, yeah, we do. I don't know that for sure, but we can find out.
Right, and I've just got a couple of quick ones about particular services. Does Azure work with any storage providers like NFS? I think there's an NFS service which is backed by NetApp, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, from NetApp, and then mainly Azure is focused on the SMB. So they do a lot of SMB, and you can do Azure file shares and things like that, but you can do that with NFS as well.
Right, and also what MDM services are available in Azure? Obviously Intune's in there, isn't it?
Yeah, Intune does all of your MDM work for you. So if you obviously, the Zen Mobile folks out there and stuff like that, they do have information out there on how to integrate that. It does run, the Zen Mobile Cloud does run, some pieces in Azure, if not all of it. I'm not sure on that because they don't, tell everybody everything. But Intune also, you can have the two work together as well.
Cool. Right, it's just started raining questions, so I'll let you crack on with your demo and we'll pick it up again towards the end.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you. So the first thing, if you're going into the Azure portal, This is the Azure portal, by the way. If you've never logged in before, I encourage you to go out and get a free account and log into it. And one of the cool things is that something called the advisor. Everyone should be going into the advisor. This is my, one takeaway from Mike today is that whenever you're running something in Azure, you should always go to the advisor blade. This is a blade, they call it. But this gives you a real quick snapshot of some of the key points of your infrastructure that you're running there: the high availability, the security, the performance, and the cost. So if you have something like a VM that's been running at 100% CPU for a month, and you just finally log into the portal and this thing comes up and says, hey, you just spent $700 and some on this VM and you really don't need it, you'd be like, oh wow, I wish I would have checked advisor earlier. So I highly recommend that you go in here and you don't necessarily take the recommendations, but it's kind of good to look at the snapshot and understand what they're trying to tell you. Sometimes you don't want to decrease the, when you go to a cost perspective, it'll say, well, you can go down because you've only used 1.5% of your CPU over a 7-day period or a 14-day period or what have you. But that doesn't necessarily equal out to what you're doing with that VM. So you take it with a grain of salt and you kind of evaluate, the recommendations as pros and cons. So if you haven't yet, once you get past this and you look at the advisor, if anybody hasn't actually know about the Cloud Shell, this is something that you really, and I timed out here, so I'll reconnect, but you can just go to shell.azure.com. If you're not familiar with this, there is a way inside of the portal here. This icon right here will bring up the Cloud Shell, but you can go to its own website too. And if you go there, this will actually allow you to run bash, what they call the Azure CLI and PowerShell commands against what you have in Azure. So if you're so inclined that you're a PowerShell user or a bash shell user or Azure command line user, you can just use this interface to go ahead and do all of your work for you. Now, part of the reason why I brought this up is because some folks really like to look at, hey, what's cool and new inside of Azure, right? So you have these preview features that you can connect to. And these preview features are everything that they're trying out. It's in public preview. The Azure Ultra SSD, blueprints, front door service, all these, the NetApp files, when we talked about the NFS, cognitive search with AI powered. This is all kinds of neat things that you can try out, right? And you can try these with the free subscription. Now, when you go in here and click try it, it's going to, basically enable it inside of your subscription, right? But there's another way you can do this, and it's not really widely known, but there is a command that you can run that actually is called Get Azure RM Provider Feature. And I'm doing a list available. So if I do enter on this, this lists all of the different previews that are available. And if you look at this, some of them are public and some are not so public. And it really depends on, if you go through and try and enable some of these, whether or not your subscriptions have been whitelisted to be able to access them. Because you'll notice some are called like beta access. Some are called canary customers, not really sure, from an IoT perspective. And then there are some that are, pretty well known, like allow private access, allow private link services, allow public mobility on the Microsoft network. So you may be able to enable some of these, and then they just, say registered, they go in and register themselves. And what I'll show here is you can actually do the same command without the list available, and it'll show you what I have enabled on mine. So I just went out and tried to add some of these, and sure enough, boom, they were like, yeah, you can have access to this, and some of them may be out there on that public page I showed before, and some may not, but they're kind of cool because then you learn about new things that they're doing. And sometimes you'll get, if you hook up on a private preview, they'll send you a link to do the same thing, and then you'll be in. So, and I'll be honest, some of the things I've tried here didn't work. So just so you know, it's not going to work all the time. So don't go yelling at Microsoft saying, I don't have access to this. Not necessarily going to work for you. One of the things I shouldn't have to mention to anybody that's used Azure is the Quick Start templates. You definitely want to go in and try these. These are things that you can play around with. These are the templates that were created for the Azure Resource Manager, which is the core framework of deploying infrastructure and applications and services inside of Azure. So you can go ahead and use these templates and basically deploy a simple Windows VM. If you click here, there's a button that just says deploy to Azure, and it will automatically come up with the template for you to fill out to deploy the VM to Azure, and it asks you all the questions in the template, and then boom, it deploys it. So there's literally, I think there's 700 and some of these now, 755, and they do all kinds of different things. So I encourage you to look at that as well. So going back to the portal here, I don't have that much time left. So what I want to do is I want to jump into a couple of things real quick. Is they've added a new thing under the virtual machines, and I'm going to go in under Monitor here. Monitor is like your core where you analyze logs and you look at different metrics and things like that. So you really need to get involved in that when you're monitoring your environment, especially from a Citrix perspective. This can really help you understand what's going on in your environment. And one they have added is virtual machines. So this will actually monitor your virtual machines in terms of, the differences with logs and performances, and it'll create a map and tell you what's connected to what. Excuse me. And when I select a group here, and let me just say I picked that one, and I pick a computer to look at, you see where all my machines are linked here. I can actually click on one of my machines here, and I can see all the processes that are running and where these processes are actually connecting to, what ports they're connecting out on the network. I can highlight one of these, and I can get more detailed information of actually what is going on. It'll tell me everything of a process summary about what's going on. So this is really kind of cool. If you think about it, you can see all kinds of neat things that are going on with the different operating systems and everything else that you're running, and how they all communicate with each other, and what can be talking to what. So I encourage you to take a look at this so you understand. If you have your Citrix environment out there, take one of your VMs that's out there in that CPS environment, put it in there, and just see what talks to what. And sometimes you'll be amazed at actually what's going on in the background. The other thing I encourage you to look at from a monitor's perspective is your usage and estimated cost. This is where it actually comes down, and you always want to monitor your costs, because one of the worst things that happens is that you get sticker shock. You finally see that first bill or that second bill or after 6 months bill, and you're like, wow, this is huge. Well, this is kind of help you. I'm going to switch the new pricing model, but this can kind of help you understand, your monthly usage and your estimated monthly costs and things like that. So, this is a really, really great thing to look at that they've added. Now, they do have something called, if you remember, they purchased a thing called Cloudine, and Cloudine actually allows you to do AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure all in one. So I encourage you to look at that. It's a little bit more integrated in terms of you can do cost analysis and all that kind of cool stuff. You can get at it from the cost and billing. The cost and billing only works for EA subscriptions, CSP, pay as you go, so on and so forth. They aren't available yet. And you want to be careful, because sometimes it'll tell you that it's there and sometimes it won't. So they're still working on this. This is something that's still being worked on, if you will. So one other thing I want to get to, I've got a very short amount of time here, is I do want to get to the cognitive services. And this is a real kind of cool, fun thing that I just played around with, and I wanted for you to see it. You can actually go out to cognitive services, and you can create an actual service that allows you to interact with AI in Azure. So you can go out there and you can say, I want to be able to do object recognition, facial recognition, things like that, and be able to play around with it in terms of creating your own project to do that. And I'm going to show you one right here. I did one, it's called Custom Vision, right? That's the name of the service. And in Custom Vision, I did something called a food test, where I put a whole bunch of food out here, pictures of food. And I created it as a, what they called a, trying to, not an object one, but it was actually trying to go in and take a look at what food I think is good and what food I think is bad, right? So I imported all these images, okay, and I said, okay, I tagged them. So if I show a tag, I have bad, 6 are bad and good are 9. And what I did was I took I did a performance, I did a train where I told AI that, hey, I want you to take these pictures, analyze them, and the ones I marked as bad, take the points out. The ones I marked as good, take the points out. And if I present another picture to you, I want you to tell me if it's good or bad, right? So look at some of these. I mean, I don't personally, I would never eat octopus. The same, I'm not even really sure what that is. But what I want to do here is I want to run a prediction. Okay, so you can do an endpoint prediction, which allows you to actually import a video like we saw with the fish on the underground data center, the underwater data center. That was actually the same AI, but it was being fed video and it was identifying the fish from whatever else that they've tagged, right? So I'm going to do a quick test here. I'm going to browse my local files, and I've got two pieces of food that I know is bad for me. And this is something called a fori, and I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right, a fori don. But if I click on open, it analyzes it, and it comes back and it says, yeah, there's a 96.9% probability that that is bad, and there's a 3% that it is good. And for me, I'm not a big sushi eater, so that is bad. But this really shows you what is possible, what the power is that you can do here. If I go back, you can create projects. I created one called, I was doing image recognition on facial. So you can, and there's a landmark one where you can actually go through a classification of a landmark and say, whether this landmark is, situated in a certain city or whatever, it'll identify where that landmark is. So this is another one of those cool things that you can check out. It's called Custom Vision inside of Azure, and go ahead and go out there and give it a shot. It's really kind of cool. I've got about a few minutes left, so I'm going to switch back here to my presentation, and let's see where it is. That one? Yes, that's the closing slide. Stay in the know, mycugc.org. I thank you very much for your time today. I really do. I wish I could do some more presentations, but I do have some videos coming out. And I'm working closely with the folks from Microsoft to get some of this preview stuff out there on video for folks, kind of play around with it a little bit. And I'm having a lot of fun doing that with them. So I really appreciate you coming today. James, do we have any other questions I can answer real quick?
Yeah, we had a few coming in there. The one that stuck out for me was somebody asked about PVS, provisioning services in Azure, and said, why doesn't that work there? And they'd heard it was available in Amazon. I didn't know that you could do it in Amazon. I'm a bit confused by that.
I'm confused too. I think MCS was available. I don't think PVS was. I think MCS was.
Go on, sorry.
Are you there?
Yes, I am. Sorry, can you still hear me?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Like I was saying, I'm not sure on the PVS. I don't think it is. But again, there's some other really smart people, that live and breathe PVS, like Jim Moyle and stuff like that can definitely answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, with an AWS deployment myself, I would have been very intrigued to see if PVS was capable, because provisioning is one of the issues we have. The Amazon AMI and sort of with Terraform and Packer and things like that we're using it's great for servers, but for CItrix servers, which kind of aren't really servers, are they? They're more like client things, it's not really the best way of doing it, so PVS would have been great. I had a couple of bits asking about Citrix Virtual Desktops Essentials. Is that free on Azure? Again, I don't know.
No, it's actually not. Just so you're aware, if you work through a partner, the Citrix Virtual Desktop, you can get the POC type of scenario, but it's definitely not free. There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one is the consumption, right? So you definitely have some storage and compute consumption there that you're gonna go through, but also licensing. you're going to be, if you're running Windows workloads up there, you have to pay for those Windows licenses. So it's not like Microsoft just gives you a free ride on that for a little while, but they do have the hybrid use benefits that you can use and other things, but that has to be coordinated through CItrix. It can't, it's not something that you can just go out and do on your own, or you should do on your own, because I've done that before, and I will tell you, you will get sticker shock from that. So you want to be really careful. Now, Microsoft Managed Desktops, that's something a little bit different, right? Because that's all integrated into Microsoft. So I encourage you to look at both and compare both.
Yeah, actually, somebody's just posted in something about the VMware PVS on VMware Cloud, but that's kind of almost, it's like putting your data center in the cloud sort of thing, isn't it? So it's a bit hybrid.
Yeah, it's not really AWS. If you understand VMware Cloud, VMware Cloud is actually a little bit separated from AWS in general. I mean, it's not the same, and there's a lot of different nuances and things that are different with the VMware Cloud from AWS Cloud. So
yeah, got a couple people asking, is there any improvements with remote console access, and talking about the serial console is not preferable. Another one.
Yeah, and that's one thing I didn't get to show. I don't know how much time here. I can bring it up real quick. If you don't mind, Stephanie, I'm just going to bring this up.
Yeah, still got a couple of minutes.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so from a virtual machine perspective, if I go into a virtual machine here, I'm going to pick a 2019 box, and there's a specific reason I'm picking that, and I'll tell you in a little bit. But if you go in here and you do a serial console, you can connect to the serial console. The serial console is not meant to be a remote access. Okay, what it's meant to be is a backdoor. It's meant to be a backup plan in case you lock yourself out, if you change firewall rules, if you, for some reason, the machine won't boot, but you can still get to a command prompt. What you get is you get to a SAC prompt, which is a serial access console prompt, and you type in command here, and it establishes a command session. And then you actually go in and you connect to the session. And you'll notice here, it brings me up to another prompt, and I enter my username and my password. And basically I get a system32, a Windows prompt. If I do a directory here, I'm inside of the file system. And I can even run, if I wanted to, I can run a PowerShell session. Okay, and it'll start a PowerShell session. So I can rescue this box. All right. There's a couple of caveats of why you would not want to use this as a normal RDP or a remote access solution, is because it's not made for multiple people to access, number one. Number two, it's encrypted, right? Everything, all the traffic's encrypted and such, but it's not as, it's not something you want to give access to everybody. You don't want everybody to be able to go into a VM and launch a serial console, because they can do some really nasty things from the serial console. It's like plugging into a serial console of a switch. You basically get the core access, and you don't want to give that out. Another thing is that from a 2019 box, okay, when you do a serial console, if you have WSL, which is the Windows subsystem for Linux, say you're running like Kali Linux or Ubuntu or something and the WSL in 2019, I can start a WSL session right here, and then I could be running in a Linux shell. So you can run Linux and Windows together through the serial console. But again, only use it for emergencies. Only use it for, like I said, a backdoor to get into a machine that you just can't connect to or is misconfigured or something like that.
Cool. I've also got someone just asked, can you show us how you got to the maps again? I must have missed that bit.
Got to the what? I'm sorry?
The maps.
Oh, the maps. Sure.
Yes.
That's actually in Monitor. Okay, and you get the virtual machines, which is should be under Preview. Okay, and when you click on the virtual machines, you select, I have a resource group, so this is showing me everything that's inside of my resource group here, and then I just click on Map. And that takes all the machines that are inside. I can go in here and select a group, which is my subscription, or not my subscription. I want to select the resource group. And then it shows all of my machines that are inside of that resource group and how they're interconnected. Now I can select an individual machine if I want to, just to see how that is connected to different resources, kind of clean it up a little bit. And then it'll tell me if I click on, like, I'm 2019 for some reason, it's talking out port 80. Well, I know why it is myself, but if I click here, okay, it'll tell me what's actually connected. There 169.254, which is obviously a self-created address, and 168.63, which may be somebody trying to, brute force my machine. I'm not sure. But this is really helpful, and this is how you get to the actual maps. If you were going to go into Security Center, okay, if you haven't checked out Security Center, I highly recommend you do. This gives you a lot of information, but it also has maps as well, right? It has security maps. So if you go into security maps, it's going to tell me I don't have any threats, right? But I go to my own security map, and this shows me my entire subscription and what happened once I took my OMS here. It shows me everything that's happened over the last, time frame I've had here, last 24. I've been actually from the state of Georgia over in Europe. 14 different botnets have tried to attack me. And in Saudi Arabia, one has actually tried to attack me. So if I click on that, it'll come back and tell me, hey, what did Saudi Arabia actually try and do? It'll tell you what it actually queried against, all that kind of stuff. So this is a security part, the threat detection that I get into in another session, but this is just another cool thing that you can do. This is what I call chasing the breadcrumbs in security. So.
Excellent. The only other one outstanding question, I know we're just about out of time altogether, is what would you recommend for a lab that's been set up in Azure if you want to build out CItrix MCS or something like that?
Yeah, so they actually do have Dev Test Labs, which is a service inside of Azure, which I use, quite a bit. This allows you to build lab environments, being able to use your own disks if you like. You can bring your own disks, you can turn them into managed disks, you create virtual machines, you can assign virtual machines to people. Basically, create formulas and what they call artifacts and secrets. I won't get into all that, but this is really, the Dev Test Labs is really kind of cool, where you can set up your own little lab environment and use it as a sandbox that, keep it isolated from the rest of your infrastructure in Azure as well. They do have something, Dev Test Labs will actually be merged into something they call lab accounts or lab services later on. Lab services is more like a classroom type lab scenario, where you can set up labs that are used for training and for classroom scenarios. So the two kind of work hand in hand. They'll be merged together eventually, but the Dev Test Labs is what you want to look at if you want to test anything like MCS or anything like that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. I think that's us all done for the questions. So
awesome. Well, I thank you again. I thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, James, for moderating. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, you can always get a hold of me on Twitter at @NellMedia. Take it away, Stephanie.
Thank you, Mike. What a great presentation. There was so much in there. I saw some stuff. I don't work with any of this, but it was fascinating to me. So especially in the beginning, a lot of the images you had were really interesting, and I really liked the fish. So thanks everyone for coming today, and thanks Mike for presenting, and James for keeping an eye on all those questions for us. I did throw some links in the chat for you all. There is a rather long link. I'm sorry about that. It's to the forum thread for this webinar. If you have more questions, we'd love for you to put them in that discussion thread on mycugc.org. I'll make sure that Mike sees them. I also have a link out there to a survey. It's short and anonymous, and we just like to get your feedback. And then finally, I have a link to our webinar calendar, just so you can see what we have coming up. And I will tell you, because this may be of interest to this crowd, next week we have an Ask Me Anything about Citrix Cloud. We have 4 CTP experts on a panel. You can bring all your questions, literally ask anything.
That's where some of those questions could get answered that I couldn't answer today, because those are some, I think Marius is on there and a couple other folks that are really, really smart about that. So.
Yeah, we have Christian Brinkhoff, Nicholas Ignoto, Marius Sandbu, and Paul Stansel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 4 CTP, so it's going to be, I think it's going to be a really good one. So you can find that one over on our webinar calendar. And again, just thank you so much. Mike, this was a great start to our 2019 webinar year. I really appreciate you doing this for us today.
Glad to do it.
All right, thanks so much, everyone. I will have a recording link out to you tomorrow, and I think Mike said he would share the slide deck, so I'll get that from him, and I'll include that in your email tomorrow. And I'll also package up all the questions and send those over to Mike just to make sure we got everything answered. If there's anything that we didn't, I'll see if he'll answer it, and then we'll put it in that forum thread that I put out in the chat. And I think that's it. I hope all of you enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks again for joining us today. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.